name is Adrian Huq, and I am the co-founder of New Haven Climate Movement's Youth Action Team. And so I've had an interesting path to organizing. Throughout middle school, I would collect other people's fruits to take home because I care a lot about food waste. I would take other people's scrap paper and other things to take home to recycle since the recycling bins in our school are not functional. And then in high school, I also took that further. I did the same thing, but I would collect a lot of other recyclables. My locker was like filled with plastic from other people. So I've always had a mindset of conserving materials and encouraging others not to be wasteful. So there's always that spark in me for taking care of the environment and feeling that responsibility to have others look out for the earth as well. There is a nonprofit organization in New Haven called the New Haven Lyon Sister City Project, and they have multiple initiatives as part of their efforts to tackle climate change in the New Haven area. That's one of their goals, and also working in Leon, Nicaragua, for social justice and against climate change is another of their goals. So they have a bunch of different initiatives, and one of those is the Elm Energy Efficiency Project. And so back in 2018, they wanted to run a pilot program in a New Haven high school where one of the high school students would educate their own school community about energy efficiency and sell energy efficient products. So I applied and I was hired to become that person in my school community, which was Metropolitan Business Academy in New Haven. And I spent the school year running campaigns surrounding energy efficiency and educating my school and my peers about it. And also New Haven Climate Movement is an organization that was started by the New Haven Lyon Sister City Project. And as part of my work with Elm Energy Efficiency Project, I was introduced to it in spring 2019, and I was asked to organize a youth-led climate strike for them, since that was when the Fridays for Future global movement was really taking off, and May 24th was one of the global strike days. So after helping organize that first strike, we decided that it would be great to continue to involve youth going forward in the climate movement, since it had only been adults at that time. And so from there, I had co-founded their youth action team, and we've grown a lot since 2019, and we've gathered a really great group of high school and college student activists who organize all the action strikes and events for the New Haven climate movement. This summer, we created our Climate Justice Schools proposal, and within this proposal, the main asks are 30 hours of interdisciplinary climate education in New Haven's middle schools and high schools. Other asks include project-based learning, meatless Mondays in the cafeteria, making school buildings more energy efficient, and greening the school transportation. So we hope to see 5 pilot schools as New Haven public high schools. And then I believe by 2023, we want all New Haven high schools to be climate justice schools. Something that we proposed within our climate justice schools proposal to help aid with all the new projects and events and activities and curriculum that these schools will be expected to have is through hiring, stipending 2 student leaders and 1 teacher coordinator per participating school. So we want the teacher coordinator and the student interns to work with each other to collaborate on different events and activities. But we do see it as important to provide teachers and students a little extra money for the extra work they're doing on top of their typical expectations as a student or as a teacher. And we presented that to the New Haven Board of Education in July 2020. And so we have been working with the Board of Education for the last few months with different key people like the assistant superintendent and the district science supervisor to try to enact this proposal. So it hasn't been passed yet, but we are working with a lot of different people within the district to see how this program would look, if it was implemented, and how it can be funded. So we are on a good path. And yeah, we hope to see this enacted very soon. So I think I'm motivated to keep fighting because here in the United States, we tend to be very short-sighted when it comes to crises, and most of the time we're pretty inconsiderate of the suffering of communities outside of our country. So I think it's really important to stand up for the countries that are being impacted by climate change right now, even though they didn't create the problem. A lot of people are losing their livelihoods, especially people who are working in agriculture for a living, and people are really being forcefully displaced and moving to cities, leaving their culture and their ancestral lands. And even like my country that my family is from is Bangladesh, and they're really being impacted by huge flood seasons and drought, losing crops. And I'm just motivated to do this because we need to give a voice to the countries that are being impacted first and worst. And first world countries aren't really doing anything about it, even though they are the ones that are contributing most to this issue. And I'm motivated to fight for climate education because I'm passionate about young people, I'm passionate about education, and climate education is one of the things that put me where I am today, in my place as an environmental activist right through high school and out of high school. So I think it's so important to educate young people about the world that they are inheriting and the world around them right now. So I think an aspect about climate change that other people aren't typically aware of or don't know that much about is that climate change is not just about global warming. A lot of people still think that's what climate change is, that's the full problem, just like hotter summers, less cold winters. But the truth is that climate change is not only the warming of the planet, but also all the social and economic and environmental consequences that come from the disasters that arise when we go above those planetary boundaries. And so we just have to remember that our planet is a very strong and resilient system, but there are limits that we're constantly pushing against. I saw someone frame climate change as our planet having a fever. And just like when you're sick, other parts of your body are also affected due to that sickness. And so just like how our planet has a fever of above 1 degree, it impacts so many other aspects of our planet and throws off that delicate balance. So even though it really doesn't sound like a lot, like in our house, if we turned it up a degree, yeah, it might not be a major difference at all. But when we're looking at a full planet, that means the collapsing of sea ice, it means sea levels rising, it means more natural disasters. So a common misconception that I come across when it comes to climate change is that it is in the distant future and that there are more current and pressing challenges that we should be focusing on first. And first of all, I would definitely want to acknowledge that there are so many current and pressing issues that are happening right now. But there's also the truth that climate change is also happening right now. And what we can do to draw down emissions drastically by 2030 is actually harm reduction for the inevitable feedback loops that we're going to see that are going to lead to climate disaster. And the truth is also that at least somebody has to be thinking in the long term instead of only dealing with the problems we are faced right now. Some barriers that could come through educators is they might not think that climate change is related to the subject that they're teaching. However, climate change really does cover a large variety of topics that are not just science. For example, social studies and history. And for policymakers, there is a lot of avoiding the issue of climate change for both monetary reasons, saying, we don't have the money to implement these solutions, or just because they feel that there are more pressing issues affecting their constituents. And also the fact that climate change is such a long-term problem and such an adaptive challenge, it lets politicians get away with not addressing it because their terms are typically 2 or 4 years, so they can easily put things off and say, that's for a politician 20 years from now. I don't need to be doing that. throughout my experience with organizing, I've learned a lot of different lessons. And one of them I could say is just the importance of growing your movement through diverse approaches. So there's always kind of like a debate when it comes to environmentalism, like, do we go the policy route or the public education route? And I think it's important to do a mixture of both. Obviously, policy is where you can get more concrete things done, but to supplement that, you also need to be trying to educate the public. So at New Haven Climate Movement, we do both of those things. We do public actions and art actions to educate residents and have them join our movement. Another thing I learned is that youth in general are capable of taking on tasks just like adults can, and sometimes it's needed for youth to take on responsibility for issues like climate change because some adults are just not taking action. So I would say don't underestimate yourself if you are a teenager or younger, because youth have a lot of power and we can use that to our advantage, especially when it comes to issues like climate change. We provide a really strong emotional appeal about how this is our future. So definitely your voice matters as a young person. Also, I've learned to meet people where they are. If someone doesn't know how to recycle, I'm not gonna use that against them, because obviously there are different barriers that come from this activity, and maybe, like, for example, their neighborhood might not accept recyclables, and so they don't really know like what goes in what bin. So definitely meeting people where they are, especially in the environmental movement, is important. So it is okay if people are not aware about climate change or still think it's just about global warming, because we can help educate them, and that's all right.
Come on.